All right, everybody. So today we have back on the podcast for a different format, Landon from Basement Bodybuilding. How we doing, man?
I'm good. How are you doing, Dave?
I'm good. So people have been following along. This is the third of this format with new guests. So as of right now, none have actually been posted. Obviously, I've done the Q&As with Abel for a long time, and this is kind of like that. The ones with Abel, it's more always been like, okay, people over time send us questions. When we get enough of them, we make a Q&A, which we will still do. This is more specifically like I'm having somebody on. Hey, everybody, this is who's coming on and we'll get some questions. So, as with the other two, comment down below how you like the format. If you want to see specific guests on for that, we'll see how it goes. But what's new with you, man?
I wouldn't say anything too crazy. As far as training goes, I'm in probably a more motivated phase than it has been for the past few months. I know obviously you've been lifting for longer than I have, so you kind of know how it goes where you have like those phases of motivation, the
Sure.
phases where you're not really trying to just like go through the motions, but where you feel a little bit less motivated. Maybe the sessions are a little bit more dreaded and whatnot. So it's been
Mhm.
nice to kind of feel that motivation come back almost like when you first get into the gym, when you first start lifting. But other than that, training's more or less similar to what it usually is. I've incorporated a few new movements, doing some stiff leg deadlifts more regularly, got my new T-bar. So some fun new stuff with training, I guess.
Cool. What led to the increase in motivation? Was it getting some new things or something else?
I think it's just totally random.
Mhm.
It seems to just come and go. I think as it is for most people, but it's it's always just more fun when you look forward to your training sessions and it doesn't feel like it's like an extension of your workday or something.
Sure. Yeah, I wish people really understood the role that randomness can play sometimes. And sometimes it's just, there's a reason you just can't explain it. Sometimes it's truly random. But like even like with muscle growth, right? Like I don't believe that the body is just always in a similar state and it's only dependent on your training. Obviously, your training is hugely important, but I'm just saying there are just times where it's like, man, I just had this really good phase and it's kind of hard to explain. It just kind of happened and vice versa. Same thing with fat loss. Like sometimes something just clicks randomness in life. If I thought before, like if I was, I'm a big fan of MMA, and something that I find interesting is, like we talk about people who are interested in it talk about like, oh, this person beat this person was so much better. But it's like, yeah, but you saw like the one time they fought. But if they fought 100 times, it could have gone the other way, 70 out of 100, and this was like the kind of random chance time. So there's a lot of that in life. But with lifting specifically, it's it is interesting how and again, this is the difference between like motivation versus, determination versus grit and all this stuff like that. How people like you would probably still push through those times when they're not motivated, right? But the average person kind of tends to fall off, and this is why they kind of stay in that like perma intermediate stage because like, well, I'm kind of motivated. I saw a movie or something, and then now I'm less motivated. So obviously, you are somebody who would stick through that.
Yeah, well, I think what one thing that any lifter that's been serious for years will kind of realize it's like when it comes to discipline and sticking with something for the long term, I find that it's the real discipline is being able to go in and out of that kind of heavily focused mindset. Like if you are somebody that's hyper obsessed with training and it's your number one priority in life for a handful of months, it's hard to still bring that same intensity and focus when you're not as motivated or something else comes up in life. So what I like to say is the real discipline with lifting is being able to kind of turn off and turn that on kind of at will. So it's like being able to take your off day and relax and switch your focus to something else and then turn it right back on when you have to get back in the gym. So how easy that is kind of depends on how motivated you are at that certain phase. But yeah, I would say real discipline is kind of being able to actually have balance and be able to kind of switch that flip on and or switch flip that switch on and off.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is one of the advantages of, the bulking and cutting. So most people who've been at this game for a long time, myself included, you get to a point where like, what, I don't think it makes sense to have these like huge swings, bulking and cutting and all that. But what it can do is kind of light a fire under you where, you've been bulking up for a long time. You're kind of at like peak fatness. I mean, you and I spoke when I was at my peak bulk in the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. And we were talking about, okay, arms are like between 17 and a half, 17 and three quarters. Do we go for 18, whatever. But at that point, like, yes, things were going well, but there was also a motivation of like, okay, now let's see how lean I can get. And as of today, I just hit my lowest weight in really since college, by far the leanest I've ever been. And now I'm like, okay, not like I'm going to go into a bulk, but I'm ready to be done with this phase. And like, I'm starting to think about different experiments I want to try that, because, if you're dieting, there's almost like no point in some of these experiments because nothing's going to happen from like a muscular standpoint anyway. So I was like, okay,
Right.
calories are going to come in. Let's try this. Let's try that. So that can increase motivation as well.
Just out of curiosity, what's your new low weight?
Oh man, you want to guess?
Yeah. How tall are you again? You're what, 6 foot or 6'1"?
Six
Did you say
one, yeah, yeah.
6'1"?
And I was 211.6 at my heaviest. I've actually been 220, but that was pretty soft. So when we spoke,
Yeah.
and 2 years ago almost, 211.6.
I would say you must be what, mid 170s?
Okay, that's actually a good guess. Yeah, so my plan before was I cut down to like 180. I did that last year and I kind of just maintained 180 for a long time. And my goal here was like get to a true 175. And by true, I mean not a depleted, but like my weekly average is 175, which means you're going to see some lows. So I finished at 173.4 last week,
Mhm.
started to ramp things up a little bit. And this morning I actually hit 172.2, which is just like mind blowing to me because again, I haven't been that weight since college. Again,
Yeah.
clearly the leanest I've ever been. But as I've said a few other times, very humbling because, I have friends who are like, dude, like compete, like step on stage, whatever. And I'm like, I absolutely am still like 10 pounds away from being contest lean, like for sure. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
like I'm the leanest I've ever been, but I don't have striated glutes, right? Like there's still some places, and it's crazy too because certain angles don't look any leaner, but it's more just like now at all angles you look lean. I think Abel said something like that too. It's like, yeah, like the random best lighting picture is actually kind of similar, but now it's like, oh, when you turn this way, you're also lean. And when you look at that, like you're also lean. But you're like, where is this fat coming from? But it just keeps coming.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of how it works. It's like even when you're bulked up, like I've been half the pictures where people think I'm shredded, I'm like 19 or 20%
Yeah,
body fat in the right lighting and with
right.
the angle and whatnot. But if I was to like turn a little or relax a little, you can clearly see it. But yeah, when you're that lean, it's like it's kind of just a permanent leanness. And even in bad lighting or not at the ideal angle or anything, you can at least always see how lean you are. But yeah, that's your 172 weigh-in. Is that post maintenance or post surplus, or were you still in a deficit when you hit that?
Well, again, that 173.4 was very depleted, but then I think
Mhm.
I had a little bit of that whoosh effect. So I slightly ramped up calories. So like that final week, I averaged like 1,800 calories. And this past week, I've averaged 2,100. But that's still technically a deficit for me.
Yeah.
So as that happened, my workout today was great. I mean, honestly, like if you look at my workouts now compared to almost 40 pounds heavier, they're not that much worse. Now, granted, some of these things are like pull-ups, weighted push-ups, where my body weight obviously has gone down, so that's affecting the weight I'm using. But I'm talking like a couple reps on a weight or something. Like it's nothing crazy, which is great because it shows, okay, I haven't lost that much muscle. But there is almost a demotivational aspect of it too, where it's like, if I can still look kind of good in clothes 20 pounds heavier, it's almost like for the average person, it's not worth it, which is what I said on my last podcast with maybe it was Mario. I said, honestly, like it's fine. I'm glad I did it. But given I'm not competing, I don't have a photo shoot, I don't know if I do it again unless it just happened to be relatively easy.
Yeah, yeah, that's still something. I've gotten super, not like super lean, but I got down to like the mid 170s once too, and that was years back when I wasn't even as big as I am now. And it's like
Yeah.
it's tough to get down there, and I'm not even as tall as you are, but even at that point, I was probably I don't know, 13% body fat or something. And it's like,
Mm.
even that's just, it's tough to maintain. And at that point, you're like, well, you still look kind of good at 16%. You feel a little
Right.
bit better and everything. So it's like, you might as well hang out up around that point. But ultimately, I think it just comes down to like how well you can manage your appetite and how good your training feels at that point in time or at that body fat level.
Yeah, it's all, and that's why I say like it. All of this, many life decisions come down to how much work you have to put in for that thing, right? So you can think about it from a wealth standpoint. It's like, well, would you let like a yacht? Sure, if you want to give me a yacht, is it worth like t turning over your whole life to work hard to get a yacht? Probably not, right? And so this cut, frankly, just was as easy as previous cuts to get to 12%. And I think, I mean, I'm usually pretty harsh with body fat. I'd say I'm probably like a true 8 to 9%. It'd be interesting to get a DEXA, but I mean, easily sub 10. And I could see, like I said, like 8 to 9%. So because it wasn't egregiously hard, it was like fine. But these last couple of weeks, definitely my sleep is crap. Energy is fine. Strength is still fine. Food focus, notably higher. Definitely like food dreams, things like that. Things like I don't in the past, I would like think about it and then think about it more. Now I just kind of push it out, but it's there. So I'm looking forward to that not being the case. So yeah, it's interesting. You get some people who it's just frankly quite easy for. Like I think Alberto Nunez, Steve Hall, it's just not hard for them to maintain like 10 to 11%, right? But I think the average person, that's not the case.
And I think a lot of it comes down to like how you can manage cravings. And this is where I think the actual food selection rather than just like a
Mhm.
calories in, calories out
Totally.
mindset can change things up quite a bit. So I don't know if you have any experience with like entirely eliminating like these hyper palatable foods that are frankly in the short term super helpful when cutting, like diet soda, sugar-free jello, things like that. But I find that just generally anecdotally, when I'm in phases where I'm eating just much more whole foods, not really having anything sugary or anything that's super savory or anything, the cravings do reduce as I eat healthier, basically.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if it's like, is it the overall appetite that gets you at a certain point that makes it tough, or is it just the cravings at a certain point? And I don't know. It's all, I do think it's quite individual because I think some people will have an easier time being at a leaner body fat percentage just based on their general hunger levels and their appetite. But some people might get stumped by their cravings, and some people might be kind of even benefited from, say, a lack of craving. So I don't know if you
Yeah,
have
it's a
any
super
there.
super interesting topic actually. So, Peter Attia, he had just released a podcast on like all things artificial sweeteners, and he's like, well, some people say that artificial sweeteners are fattening, other people say, and this is more likely the case, that they will maybe increase cravings, so you eat more later. And as somebody who has tracked calories literally for 20 years, it is exceptionally obvious to me that it is the calories in, calories out model in terms of like total weight gain, and that if people are not losing weight by switching three Cokes to three Diet Cokes, it's because they're making it up elsewhere. Like that's just very, very obvious to me. However, most people don't track calories, and so in the real world, is what really matters. And so I think it's probably the case that if you were to eliminate all these artificial sweeteners and everything like that, you would just inherently reduce cravings for sweets. Like that would very likely happen and has been shown to happen in plenty of studies and anecdotally as well. However, I think for a lot of people can be immensely helpful. So I thought you were going to go more towards like the area of like filling foods, which is for sure true. Like I eat a ton of vegetables and fruits and all these things like that. I have not in many years. I used to have a lot of sugar-free Jello, sugar-free gums, sugar-free. I used to literally have like 2 liter diet cream sodas and things like that. And I just got to this point where even though I still have a huge sweet tooth and I still enjoy the sweets, to have all those things by themselves gives me this kind of gross perma sweet taste to the point that like even as a pre-workout, I'll just take like individual supplements like the creatine and citrulline and things like that. And I don't even flavor it because I just don't want that like taste in my mouth too long. I literally just like swish it and drink it with water. So it's weird, and yet I really like sweets. But I think if you're not somebody who can control the calories, I could see, yes, having all these things add up. For me personally, I have a little bit of like direct sucralose powder, which we like Splenda. I'll put that in some things. I'll have a couple tablespoons of sugar-free syrup on different things that I have. Like people on Instagram have seen me have these like huge fruit parfaits I do every day. It's just like Greek yogurt, whey, and just a pound or more of fruit. And I'll put a little bit of syrup on that. And that to me has been very helpful. But I do think there are some people where it's like they taste the sweet. Now they need to have this real thing. That's just not my experience personally.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, I think, because it's like in the short term, that stuff is incredibly helpful. Like if you have a fat loss goal to achieve, say for like a bodybuilding show or like whatever, you have a certain deadline that you set for yourself where you want to achieve a certain amount of fat loss in a certain time frame. That stuff is super helpful in the short term, but for actually being able to maintain a leaner body fat percentage, if you not only just restrict like calorically dense sweet foods, but you just eliminate the cravings altogether by eliminating even like calorie-free sweets and stuff like that, it's only going to be beneficial once your cravings are actually kicked. So it's almost just like a few weeks of kind of toughing through it and really just going based on willpower. And then I'd imagine that your window of what your like comfortable body fat percentage is will decrease for everybody, even if it's not necessarily the same endpoint. Like if you're eating, say, not a whole ton of whole foods, it's a lot of processed stuff, then maybe like the 18 to 23% window just kind of feels naturally best for you. But if you were to go just based on whole foods, bulking becomes that much harder to get into a surplus with. Your appetite's going to kind of adjust accordingly. Like you said about more filling foods, if you have a whole ton of vegetables, like there's no doubt those are they're just voluminous and they're very filming. So film they're very filling. So
Yeah.
if you were to just eat more like filling not so palatable foods, then ultimately like how much harder is it to bulk up to 23%? And
Sure.
is like 18 or 20% now kind of your new ceiling body fat wise?
It's probably true. Like in general, I would definitely advise people to go towards more whole foods, less artificial ingredients, and all of that. I agree. And if you look at like Alex Leonidas, he's completely eliminated like basically anything that's not like a vegan whole food. So almost inevitably, I think that would bring somebody naturally lower. What I will say though is that the artificial sweeteners and whatnot can really allow you to get some high volume foods and then it's tough because like if you were totally okay with just not having any more sweets, because a lot of times it's the sweets and stuff. Like if I said, okay, instead of this big parfait thing with, a little bit of sucralose and syrup, I'm just having that plain, it would still be good, but I'd probably look forward to it a little bit less. So I'd probably eat a little bit less of it, etc. So I think enjoyment of food would go down, which you could argue is a good thing in that situation. And then at some point, you're going to get so lean that everything tastes good. So again, like that would be an argument in favor. There are some of these things with like modern, culinary tricks and whatnot where you can make these like like the protein fluff and stuff like that. I mean, even when I was like deep into a diet, I could make 5 to 8 cups of this protein fluff, which I only did a couple of times, and it's like 200 calories. I literally couldn't even finish it. Like in a diet, I couldn't finish it because it was just so much volume. You got some like xanthan gum and stuff in it. So if somebody's just like really struggling, but like you said, once you're at that point, maybe trying to like wean off that stuff, I would agree. But like you said, I think they can be really helpful, and I don't think there's much evidence to suggest that in even moderate amounts, let alone low amounts, that they're really doing much harm.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree about that. It's more so just the overall cravings, if you can minimize that, and even if you do have to eliminate, say, sweets for the most part altogether to kind of get rid of that craving, I do think if you're just talking about like a full-blown lifestyle change
Mhm.
and you just want to get rid of that craving altogether, then I do think it definitely has its time and place if it is a high priority for you. That
Yeah,
full
and,
staying.
and ultimately, it's so much about, like you said, the hunger cravings. This is why it was interesting to see. Probably you might have seen Mike Israel saying like everybody should be on, Ozempic and things like that. And obviously,
Mm.
I disagree with that take. But at the end of the day, like if you can suppress people's appetite, I mean, you basically solved obesity. So that's the big thing.
Hmm.
Cool. So, all right. So let's jump into some of these questions here. All right. So, first question by Dinsdale. I'm a tall lifter with long femurs. What is the best way to eliminate hip shift in Smith squats? It seems no matter how much I focus on quads, my glutes are sore the next day. I've tried heel elevated and upright torso. What do we got?
So I'm somebody that I'm not particularly tall, but I do have quite long legs. So it does make squat patterns pretty tricky. If you're doing a quad biased squat and your intent is to get the most quad stimulus you can, and you have a Smith machine where it does not have the actual hip support like a hack squat or pendulum would, what I would do in this case is actually just shift your stance back a little bit so the bar is almost just over midfoot or even a little bit in front of that. And what that will do is it will almost, just based on where your center of mass is, it will incentivize you to track your knees a little bit farther forwards. If your stance is far in front of you, to have the best leverage to come up, your hips are actually going to want to shift a little bit farther back. So I find that this cue gets overlooked a little bit. It's definitely not the most popular way to squat, but if you actually have your stance just a little bit farther back in the Smith, it will kind of naturally guide you into a more knee dominant position. From here, it's totally fine if your heels come up. That's normal. If you want to use plates, that's fine. Squat shoes are definitely useful. Squat wedges, in my experience, are the best way to go about this. But ultimately, any type of heel elevation is fine. And even if you want to go without it entirely, you still kind of can get away with that since it is the Smith, and all your force will be directed upwards anyways. You don't have to worry about balance because the guide rails.
Yeah, it's interesting with Smith squat, people oftentimes almost turn it into like a hack squat type position and put their feet out, which can be fine depending on what you're emphasizing. But yeah, like to your point, if you can get the feet back a little bit more, and as this person said, the upright back, the heels elevated. But I think getting it more so you have more essentially just that knee bend there. Because if you actually look at like the angles, I mean, I've seen some people step really far out and you could make a dramatic difference there. So other than stand, now to some, I think there are some people where like they're built in a certain way. It is just tough to emphasize one over the other, but I think that's probably the best you can do.
Yeah, I agree. And Smith hack squats, I think they have their time and place if you like them and if you have good bodily control. So if you're somebody that's like an intermediate or later and you're able to uh keep better control over your hips, your back, your knees, all that kind of stuff, it can work totally fine. But I would say it's definitely a lift where you want to, like Alex Leonidas would say, kind of get more out of less weight. You're not really going to be able to put in a maximal effort in terms of just overall weight used, just because at that point you are going to be compromising your technique.
Sure. Cool, cool. All right. Felipe asks, I'm getting stronger, but not bigger. Actually, I'm looking flatter. Is this from too little volume or low protein? Thoughts?
So you'd have to know a bit more context to answer this question properly, but I would say if you feel flatter, there could be two separate instances going on with diet. I would say if you're in a deficit, even if it's a very mild deficit that you're unaware of, that can certainly lead you to look a bit flatter. In same goes for if you're like comparing how you felt at, say, the start of a bulk to how you're feeling months later when you've gained a decent amount of body fat and when you don't have a pump and you're not in great lighting. Even if your muscles are much bigger and you have made good progress, you will look a little bit like flatter in pictures. I noticed this, and I'm sure it's a similar instance for you, Dave, but you'll notice, at least for myself personally, when I bulk up, my delts look smaller. All the striations kind of go away, the fat kind of starts to accumulate between the side delt and that bicep area. So it just looks flatter, it looks smaller. But every time I cut down, the delts are still there and they kind of just appear out of thin air almost. So usually that flat look or feel is going to be a little bit more diet related. So I'd compare yourself at things like certain body weights. I'd compare your strength level or even strength to body weight ratio. You can look at things like just overall body fat percentage, whether it's just a visual test by looking at two different pictures taken in the same lighting. You could do waist measurements and compare that ratio to your body weight and all these other kinds of things too.
Yeah, yeah, both points about the diet are important because if you're bulking up, then for sure, you could end up just being softer. This is why I'm big on measurements as well as pictures, just everything involved there. If you're getting stronger, like substantially stronger, it's very unlikely that you're not getting bigger if, you've been at this game for a while. Obviously, if you're a beginner, it's a different story. It's usually not a situation where this person asked, like, is it too little protein? Probably not. And maybe it could be too little carbs if you had suddenly switched to like a lower carb diet or something. But more than likely, I think you probably just need to give it time and actually be eating the surplus and take the measurements over time. But like the flatness aspect, it's very unlikely that you're just gaining all this strength and no muscles following.
Yeah, spot on. If you're getting stronger and your technique is even for the most part the same, you're building muscle. If it's like if by saying you're getting stronger is you like switching from a high bar to a low bar squat and now you're technically stronger in terms of just the
Hmm.
absolute weight you're lifting, there's some flaws with that. But if you are generally keeping your technique the same and you're notably stronger than you were before, like basically you're doing things you couldn't do earlier on, then yeah, you're building muscle.
Yep. Cool. So the guy is Kevin Gym Gain. So his thoughts on growing home gym space. Are they better than commercial gyms? So I don't, it says growing home gym space. I'm going to assume he means like filling out your home gym. Like what would you have? Obviously, you and I talk about home gyms quite a bit. So maybe one way we can answer that is just like if we have space, how would we build our home gym? What are like some of the essentials?
I wonder if he means like like the home gym community growing or something like that, where home gyms are like becoming more popular. But yeah, either way, we could talk about just like how to fill out a home gym.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so for uh for a home gym, I'm obviously a pretty big fan of them. Got quite a bit of equipment myself. I would say when it comes to expanding and building your home gym, the first thing you're going to want to focus on is versatility, and that will allow you to do as much of your work as you can at your home gym. So if you want to get something like a Smith machine or a power rack, these are going to be the two best options. The power rack will allow you to train as many barbell variations as you want. It lets you do basically any movement pattern. You can obviously have a pull-up bar attached. Most power racks even just come with a flat bar. If you don't want to upgrade to like a multi-grip bar, you can basically do anything. It's obviously going to be pretty limited in terms of like the overall variety, but you can train every muscle group, which is going to be key. Same goes for a Smith machine. The one kind of counter argument for getting a Smith instead of a power rack is just that a Smith usually doesn't have a pull-up bar and you can't do curls. And I would agree the curl part, yeah, you can't do curls. So you are going to have to invest in like an easy bar or even just a barbell without a power rack. Um, but when it comes to pull-ups, them not having a pull-up bar, you can actually just rack the bar up high and do pull-ups there. You can't do neutral grip, but you can do supinated or pronated pull-ups. And then from there, I would start to expand into something like a single stack cable tower or adjustable dumbbells. And this will give you a ton of variety to do a little bit more niche isolation movements for things like lateral raises, dumbbell curls, and skull crushers. Same for the cable. You can do cable curls, push downs, overhead extensions, all that kind of stuff, cable side raises. And you could even do cable rows, which is quite nice. So those are kind of like the bread and butter, like first things I'd go for. And obviously I do have a few more things I'd go beyond that, but that's kind of what I'd start with.
Yeah, I think if you can get, and again, I don't know, obviously like budget. So from a space standpoint, if you can get some of these like functional trainers, you can do a ton. So I have the jacked up power rack, but that was 5,000 and then, I had, whatever. So I've added things to it. And for some people, like that's not super reasonable, depending on the person. And it's not something that you're probably going to be able to get on like Facebook Marketplace, whereas like you could get a bench on Facebook Marketplace, you could probably get Power Rack on Facebook Marketplace. So you're probably not going to be able to get as good of a deal. But for me, it's just been fantastic having that. So if we're talking like what can we get in a relatively small space? I would say something like a functional trainer if you can afford it, because you can do everything. Like I have other stuff, but truly I could do everything I wanted to do just on that with the accessories. I could train legs. I think they even have a leg extension and leg curl attachment. I have my own separate thing for that, but I think they do have that. So you could train everything. If it's more from a standpoint of a budget, then yeah, I would say a power rack with a barbell and some basic weights because you're still going to be able to do so much with that. I mean, especially if you get one that has just, pull-up attachment. And even then, I mean, if you just want to get I think I got my like a pull-up, like the ones that go in the door. I got that
Mhm.
over COVID when it was like 20 bucks, from like Facebook Marketplace or something. So like that is just easy to have anywhere. That really covers like the majority. If you're really on a budget, squat rack, barbell, some weights, and ability to do pull-ups, and you can do most things. Beyond that, if you can get something for like a leg extension, leg curl, there are actually some home ones that I think are pretty decent. and aren't crazy expensive. Um, and then you can start getting into some more fun accessories if you have the budget for it. The adjustable dumbbells can be really nice. Again, if you have a barbell, it can be a little superfluous, but they can be nice. And then if you can keep going from there, you can start getting some fun attachments. Like I've got a belt squat attachment, I've got a lat pull down attachment. So then you can start really getting into more things like that.
Yeah, that's kind of like the just the best like base you can get for a home gym. Yeah, you're not going to find them on Facebook or anything, but if you have the money to get one of those, it's I mean, why not? I mean, it covers cables and it's a so you can in a lot of them you can use it as like a half rack too, or like some type of
Mhm.
squat stand where you can rack your barbell. They come with a Smith. The functional trainer is obviously huge.
Yeah.
And yeah, from there you can get certain attachments to like use for a foot support for a cable row, or even like do you have a lat pull down attachment on yours?
I do. It's pretty sweet because it's with my height, I wasn't able to get a full stretch. So then I was sitting on the floor and doing one arm, which was just really annoying after a while. But they have a like an extender essentially. So it goes on the top rung and then it goes up, however many inches. So I can, again, I have like a 6'4" arm span. I can get a full stretch and it comes with obviously the seat at the bottom of it and everything. So that hooks in. And I do have to add weight. I bought like an extra like weight extender pin so I can balance it on both sides.
Mhm.
But so I'll do, I don't know, I add like I think it's like 350, but it's a 2-to-1. So anyway, point being, yes, it's great.
Yeah, yeah, I think sweet. So I would say if you are somebody that is just like looking to quickly build a home gym, you don't want to spend a whole ton of money. You want to keep it fairly reasonable. I mean, obviously it's gym equipment, so you're spending a decent amount of money in the first place, but I'm a huge Facebook Marketplace guy. This is how I built my home gym. So I would go on Marketplace. You're gonna have to make a few kind of long, boring drives, but
Yeah.
it's worth it. Your gym equipment lasts forever. So find a power rack. If you want to get something new, I would look around on Titan Fitness. I actually got my power rack new from Titan. I'm not affiliated with them, but maybe one day I will be. I do like a lot of their stuff. It's a pretty good price, and it's you. I feel like you get more than what you pay for in terms of quality. Like there's a lot of cheaper home gym brands that aren't
Mhm.
all that great, but I find Titan Fitness does a good job.
Do
It's
they
not the
make the dual leg extension leg curl? Is that them?
I believe they have one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen
Oh,
one seated that like you can go back and forth. I don't know if that's the right one, but
is that does Brian Borstein have that one? I know he
I
has
think so.
yeah, I can't remember what brand he has, but I know I've seen him use it a handful of times. Those are pretty nice machines where you can adjust the resistance profile. You can swap back and forth between a curl and extension. They don't take up that much space either, which is nice. So I would say if you're looking for used stuff, you can just type in Smith machine, put on a decent radius on Marketplace. Power rack, same thing. I would also look at the like single stack cable towers. This is a really good, just kind of like low cost, very small footprint. I mean, they literally take up like it's probably 4 square feet because it's just a single stack tower. They're a couple $100. You could find them used for even less on Facebook, probably. You can get them in various heights. So they can fit in short ceilings, tall ceilings, whatever. Kind of a pain to set up, but ultimately once they're up, they work pretty well. And you can do things like obviously single arm pull downs. If you have a bench in front of you, you can do seated cable rows. It's easy to install like a DIY foot plate, and you can all sorts of isolations on them too. And that should cover quite a bit. And then from there, it's like any leftover space or money you have can just go towards what your preferences are. So if you want to get like some type of machine row or something, that's a cool option since rows can be kind of tricky at home gyms since they're all going to be working the spinal erectors a bit. So something like with a little bit of chest support on a machine row is always a good option. Like personally, I love preacher curl, so that's an easy one for me. And you can kind of just get whatever you prefer at that point once you have all the versatility stuff down.
Yeah, I haven't done a ton of exceeded cable rows. I have the foot plate for it. I just haven't really done it much. My favorite currently, it's almost like my friend said this, it's like a cable version of a hammer strength low row, which I love. But basically, it's just a chest supported low row. And I do it unilateral, and you can like really go into the stretch there. And I'll just use the stack for that, and that feels really good. So there are definitely different rowing options. And there's a Smith within mine. The only ones I've seen that have a Smith or like big names. There's the Jacked Up, and then I think Force USA also has a Smith in it. And I don't use it that often, but when I want to have it, it's really nice to have it.
Oh, easily. Yeah, easily.
Cool. All right, so let's see. So Anthony asks, how big should someone expect to be at a certain height, at any certain height? Is there a limit? So obviously that's like a super broad question. I would just say that's going to largely depend on your genetics, obviously. What I will say is that generally speaking, if you're trying to equate heights, people all say it's like about 5 pounds per inch. I've seen some people, generally shorter people, say it's 7 pounds per inch. I feel like they overestimate it to try to sound bigger, and then vice versa. Like the taller people will say it's not that much, but I think generally close to about 5 pounds per inch. But as far as like how big, I mean, if you look at like top natural bodybuilders, average natural bodybuilder, which is still going to be good genetics, right? If they're competing, like 5'10", 160 on stage, but and then you can go up from there quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky to go into all the specifics of how you can get big at various heights. So I think you covered it nicely with the 5 pound rule.
Yep, cool. Quick one. How many meals a day do you typically eat, and how often do you train weekly? By Raphael.
Yeah, so I typically eat 3 meals a day. I don't talk about my diet a whole ton on the channel, but I know people are quite interested in it because it's kind of inevitable that someone's going to take interest in somebody that trains for hypertrophy's diet. So as far as my diet goes, I'll go into some brief specifics with it. I eat 3 meals a day. It's a pretty basic, boring diet. It's not like a stereotypical bodybuilder diet quite. But it is, I'm not a foodie at all. So I just kind of eat more for convenience and just general health than anything. So typically my diet is along the lines of Greek yogurt would be my breakfast, and I'll put some granola in there. I usually find some type of protein granola so you kind of get, I guess, more bang for your buck in the breakfast. Not a whole ton of calories or anything, but I'm mostly just maintaining my weight right now. For lunch, I almost always have a smoothie. So what I'll do is just get some frozen fruit, just a frozen fruit mix of a few different types. From here, I will add a serving of spinach. I just do frozen spinach since it lasts longer and it's easy, keeps the smoothie cold. From here, I'll add a banana. I will add some soy milk for extra protein, and I dislike eating beans, so that's just an easy way to get some type of beans in my diet. I will add sometimes flaxseed meal for some extra healthy fats, and then I'll add creatine and protein. Simple as that. That's my lunch. Sometimes I'll have a protein bar with it, maybe like a bagel or something, and it's a pretty simple lunch. And then for dinner, it's typically just going to be I'll cook a chicken breast and I will cook some type of like potato or onion with that and chop them up. Simple as that. And I'll have maybe a cucumber with that. And that is pretty much my diet. Not that exciting, not that fun, but it keeps me healthy and it covers the macros for me.
Yeah, I find that not surprisingly, obviously, people become more and more foodies the leaner they get, right? So I'd consider myself in general a foodie, but even more so when dieting. But then conversely, this topic in general is actually pretty interesting to me because I've had people who say like, oh, like you're really obsessed with food, like my brother, for example, like, oh, like, you're definitely think about food a lot. And I'm like, yeah, but you eat junk food all the time. So you are eating these hyper palatable foods. I don't eat them, so I will think about them, or when it's time to have one of those, it's like a bigger treat. You're eating ice cream and crap all the time, so it's just kind of like your normal, life, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I've also seen other people who, like, I remember thinking about this with Steve Hall, where he was like, I'm not the type to ever have a cheat or anything like that. And I don't really think about food. I just kind of eat. But then when I actually asked him to break down his diet, every day involved like two cookies and like a Ninja Creamy And I'm like, well, I guess you're not obsessing about it, but the food you're eating is still, it's not like you're like chicken, broccoli, chicken, rice. You know what I mean? So anyway, it's interesting how people, the perception of themselves and others in relation to thoughts of food, and yet actually how that plays out in their diet. You know what I mean?
Right, because it's like if you were to, he might say that you're food obsessed, but if you were to restrict his ability to have chips, ice cream, whatever, I would assume he'd pretty quickly start to think about it once you kind of strip the mindless routine away from it in a way.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah. Even like my mom is just naturally like a very thin person, would just like pick at little things and not, have much craving. So she could just never relate, I think, to somebody. Like if she was like, "Oh, I'm so hungry," it's like, "Oh, I'm famished. I haven't eaten in 3 hours." You know what I mean? Because it's just one of those types of people. But it's like, yes, but if we got you into like a starvation camp, you would find that like every other human, you start to obsess about food. And so that's again going back to that earlier conversation. This is where things like Ozempic can probably be very life changing for people because it's like, oh, like, I know Israel has talked about this with his wife, like, oh, wow, this is what it feels like to not obsess about food every moment of every day. Obviously, that's on the extreme end, but yeah, I mean, definitely, I'm not anything like that, but
Mhm.
more so than like I would say probably average. So it's just very interesting. All right. Oh, and then my answer to that is I have 3 meals a day pretty much every day, and I weight train 3 to 4 days a week, and I do cardio 4 days a week. So my cardio is pretty basic. I do like three zone two-ish sessions and then one zone four-ish session. And then weight training is basically an upper lower split that I hit 3 or 4 times a week. I love the upper lower split. I love being able to alternate back and forth. I remember, man, it must have been well over a year ago now. And I got hyped talking with Brian and Abel about like, okay, I'm going to try bro split. It sounds cool. I haven't done one since I was like in high school. I did 1 week of that and I was just like, dude, this sucks. Like I'm warming up and I'm like, I'm only warming up one muscle. And then like I did my first back exercise and then the next one was obviously significantly weaker. And then the next one was even weaker. And I'm just sitting around waiting for my next set. So I'm a hardcore upper lower guy.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I had the same experience years ago. I believe it was 2021 when I tried this the bro split because I've never actually been able to bring myself to even do a bro split because when
Mm,
I came into the fitness industry it was 2016, 2017, and that was when everything was all about frequency. People were talking about training a muscle 3 times a week instead of
yeah.
two. If you trained a muscle twice a week, then you're cooked. You're not getting enough weekly frequency. And obviously, as a beginner, I kind of fell for all that, even if it was very extreme at the time. It was very much a fad, just like a lot of things still are these days. But I was training basically, it was like a push pull repeat, and I would train 6 total days per week, three push
Mm,
and pull, a little bit of leg work dispersed throughout each push and pull session. So I was always obsessed with frequency. Eventually, I brought myself to a point where I was like, I'm gonna just try a bro split. Like my motivation's low. I am moving on from powerlifting. I'm just curious to see how it goes. And after like I don't even think I got through my first full week. So
yeah.
respect to you for going through that, where it's um it's like an enjoyable split if you ignore your strength and performance entirely. Like if we were
Exactly.
of the perception that like muscle damage is the primary cause of growth, and frequency doesn't matter, strength doesn't matter. The bro split is extremely enjoyable. You can just absolutely smoke every muscle every day of the week. It's wonderful. It just doesn't necessarily work like that. And when you know that after a handful of sets of starting a back workout with lat pull downs, that now you might have a few good sets of rows and then everything else is kind of just wishy-washy after that. Now it just mentally, when you know it's not as productive as you hope it could be, it's just not all that enjoyable, at least I find.
Yeah. Yeah, the chest workout was decent. I found like if I picked all new exercises that I didn't have a reference for, then it's like, okay, now this is my new baseline. But if I did like, okay, I started with pull-ups, but then I went to a chest supported row, but normally a chest supported row would be first, let's say on another day, now that's weaker. And I went to another thing and that's weaker.
And then so I didn't answer how many days a week I train per
Oh
se,
yeah,
which I
yeah,
think
yeah.
is part of the question. So just to quickly touch on this, I train as of now, it's 5 days a week. For the majority of the past 6 months or so, I've been training 4 days a week, either an upper lower split or a push pull split, one day on either. But now it's push pull legs, push pull. Basically, what I'm doing here, push day, per usual, what you can kind of expect based on the exercise I use. Same for a pull day. Leg day, I'll do a squat pattern, a hinge. I'll train my neck, abs, calves, all that kind of stuff. And then I'll repeat another hinge variation on my second pull day. So I hit my hinges, hamstring, spinal erectors twice a week, rest of the legs once a week. Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've lost, man, neck. I was just talking with Mario about this, and like my neck has gone down a full inch now at the end of my cut. And I mean, the plus side is from training, when I started training and I was 190 pounds, it went up an inch. So you could argue, hey, now at this really light body weight, you have the same neck size as when you used to be, 17 to 18 pounds heavier. Sure. And that's great. But yeah, definitely a big drop there.
Well, that is
Um,
that is actually pretty impressive to have the same neck size as 15, 18 pounds heavier. I mean, that's legit progress.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that was, now back in like 2017, but when I started. So yeah, it's definitely a benefit, but
Yeah.
just to see that, I mean, obviously all the measurements have gone down though, right? I mean,
Mhm.
arms are an inch and a half lower than what they used to be way back.
Oh yeah.
So, Atlas Power Shrugged. How does he feel about being banned from hiking in the woods?
Who?
I don't know. I don't, is that a reference? Isn't that something that happened in Canada? Does he think you live in Canada?
Oh, I wasn't aware, but he he jokes that I'm from Canada quite a bit since it's a common misconception. So
Okay. I
Atlas, I would
guess.
say I it's a coincidence that I haven't been hiking in the woods. It has nothing to do with me living in the Great North.
I guess this will be a quick one. The best lift named after somebody. So like after a JM press, Helms row, Powell raise, Arnold press, Yates row. I don't even know what a Helms row is.
You don't know the Helms row? Chest supported dumbbell row on a bench. So it's like if you set an incline bench up to like 45 degrees or whatever, you stand behind it, support your upper pecs on that bench, and then you just row from there.
Gotcha. Okay, I thought you were going to say just you're on the bench, and I was like, that's definitely not invented by Helms. That's just a chest
Yeah,
supported
we
dumbbell
we'd
row.
have to call him out for the next 5 minutes if that was the case. No,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
little different.
So
Um,
okay, so
I'd have
he's
to
just
I'd have to
just
think about it. You go first.
Well, I'm still on this Helms row thing. So he basically is turning around and then just putting his chest on there. And why does he like doing that over a standard chest supported like dumbbell row?
So if you're doing a normal chest supported dumbbell row on an incline bench, it's going to have you pulling a bit more upright. And if you are going mostly stiff legs bent over supporting your chest on the back of an incline bench, you're basically keeping your spine parallel to the ground. So it's more of a direct horizontal row rather than like
Hmm,
a more upright Yates style dumbbell row, if that makes sense. That's at least my interpretation of it. And that's what I've seen in my experience. I haven't done these extensively, but
gotcha.
I've done them a handful of times. And that's kind of the gist I get from them.
Yeah, I mean you could just lower the incline and then you'd hit the floor, so you'd have to
Yeah.
lift the bench up. And I guess at that point that's like a seal row kind of.
Yeah, it's
Um,
too much of a pain to set up.
Yeah,
I'd say.
yeah. Interesting. I used to Yates. I'm not a fan of the Arnold press for what it's worth.
Mhm.
I feel like you're just making it harder and not getting any real benefit to that. Like
Mhm.
even Meadows used to talk about this. Basically like a twisting dumbbell press. And even that you could argue like, okay, because of, the like a secondary function of the pecs, how if you're bringing that in, like I could see that having like a slight benefit. But an Arnold press, I'm like, I just don't really see much of a benefit of that like twist there. But I used to do Yates rows a ton and I do like them. I don't think they're like particularly amazing or anything for any reason other than I just used to do them a lot. So I guess I would put Yates rows.
Yeah, I like Yates rows, and this wouldn't be my pick, but I like them because they're a barbell row that's easy to set up and load heavy. Everybody has access to it, but allows you to cheat without totally cooking your spinal erectors. So if you have squats or deadlifts the day after, the day before, or even the same day, you don't have to load the spine quite as much, and then you can actually target more of the mid and upper traps than you would on a normal row. It's also easier to take the lats out of it, and I like that you can kind of use a little bit of cheat and body English because when you just look throughout history, everybody that has massive traps is doing cheat rows. Like I don't think it's a coincidence that that stuff like that is very popular. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of that sweet spot where you can use a little bit of momentum and cheat to assist you instead of make it easier. But I'd say for my pick of a lift that's the best lift named after somebody, unless I'm totally drawing a blank on another for some reason, I would have to say the JM press. The
Mhm.
variation I do is a little bit different than the way JM Blakely taught it because obviously he was going for strength. I'm going more for just maximizing hypertrophy, but for the sake of giving him credit, it's a similar enough lift, and it was heavily inspired by his variation. So it's a little different, but it's ultimately under the umbrella of the lift he invented.
Yeah. Can I reach an advanced natural physique even if I'm not obsessed with lifting?
Um, So this is where it just gets to be this is where definitions are important, I would say,
Yep.
because I think it almost just makes more sense to add the word elite, to add the category of elite to lifters. So if we're going to classify the stages of natural lifting as beginner, intermediate, advanced, and then elite, I would say at that point, you could probably get to an advanced level without being like a super obsessed kind of type A lifter. But if you want to get to like what we commonly talk about as maybe like elite, I don't think you could quite get there without being super obsessed with lifting. But I do think like a good late intermediate stage is quite realistic.
I would mostly agree with that. I would also just add, though, that, and again, definitions are important here because, and there's a quote, I forget who said it, but it's like, you tell me what you think about, and I'll tell you what you are. And I remember, way back, I mean, everything about lifting was on my mind 24/7. And if you actually looked at what I was doing, though, there was a period of time where I wasn't doing cardio. So I was lifting 4 days a week. I was eating 3 to 6 meals per day, depending on the time. And if you actually look at it, it's like, okay, I know soccer moms who are actually exercising way more than I am, right? I'm doing like 4 hours a day or 4 hours a week of lifting, and then I'm eating, and everybody's to eat. So you could say you're not that obsessed, but I was on the forums hours and hours a day. I was thinking about hours, so I was obsessed in that regard, and I wanted to make it perfect.
Mm.
So it's like obsessed in what way necessarily? If you're just saying like, hey, I just want to go to the gym 3 days a week, and like you don't have to be thinking about it all the time. If you're just like, hey, I want to go to the gym 3 days a week, I'm just gonna think about being a small surplus, and every other moment of the day, I'm not thinking about it. As long as what you're doing in the gym is productive and you're eating that surplus, then yeah, totally. You could not be obsessed at all and still make, amazing gains. And then as far as the advanced thing, I would say if you're gauging it of what your own body could be, of what you would be as a beginner, intermediate, advanced, then even with what I said, you're probably just not going to get to your advanced without some level of obsession with it. But with that said, if we're talking about generally what the community would consider advanced, then I would say, again, hugely depend on genetics because a Ronnie Coleman level genetics could literally like not care much at all, and he would still be advanced by most standards. And unfortunately, there's many people who could be completely obsessed about it and not achieve what most people would think as an advanced physique. So that plays a lot into it. And obviously, you can't change that. So I'm going to just more so go with this part of the question of like what your advanced body would be. And I would say that would still probably take time and some level of obsession with it.
Yeah, I would agree with the obsession point. I think you made a good point about uh just obsession showing more so in how your mindset is and what you're focusing on when you're not in the gym versus when you are, because ultimately your time and energy for lifting is finite. It's not like another hobby. Like if you're talking about someone that's into fishing, like okay, you can go fishing before work, and if you have a long lunch break, you can go fishing. If you want to go fishing after work, go for it. You can go fishing on the weekends. You can spend 10, 20 hours a week fishing if you have the time for it, and you're not going to like burn out or run into overuse injuries or anything.
Right, right.
You're talking about lifting. When you're talking about lifting, you only have so much you can give, and the your returns diminish pretty quickly in terms of just the overall amount of work that you're doing. So what I would say is if you are somebody that is able to switch your mind kind of away from the gym when you're not there and then turn it right back on, that kind of hardcore focused mindset when you are in the gym, you probably don't have to be obsessed, but you have to be able to become obsessed and on a pretty short notice. I find that the people that are more obsessed outside of the gym and they're always thinking about the gym outside the gym, at least for a legit extended period of time, those are the people that are more likely to meet their potential at least sooner, just because they go into each session with at least hours, if not days, of pressure and mental preparation for that session. So if you're somebody that was focusing on work, focusing on whatever it is, family, work, hobbies, friends, etc., and then all of a sudden you're at the gym, you don't have all that much pressure or reason to necessarily go all out on the sets that you have in that session, other than how motivated you can make yourself in that very moment. If you're talking about somebody that's been hyping themselves up and worrying about it and like anticipating this session for hours or days, then that set just means a lot more to them and it holds a lot more weight because of how much mental energy it's taken from the past couple days. So for somebody like that, I would say being obsessed, even if the workload and the time spent in the gym is equated, the person that is more obsessed outside the gym is more likely to reach their potential or become advanced. So I'm not saying it's impossible if you're not obsessed, but it is going to be much trickier because you're more susceptible to messing things up or not taking things as seriously.
Sure. Cool, cool. All right, let's see. Do you think there's any benefit bulking past 15% body fat aside from the bare mode aesthetic?
Yeah, I would say anecdotally, every big natural lifter has gone on a big bulk and made significant progress on that bulk. I would also say every natural lifter has done a giant unnecessary bulk too. So it's like
Yeah.
I would say it's kind of pointless to do a bunch of them over and over and over, but like I mean, I feel like I became an intermediate lifter just by going on not like your typical dirty bulk, but by getting up to 22% body fat, just going all out in the gym.
Yeah.
So I would say doing that once or twice will make you a significant amount of progress. Um, but you can't just keep doing them forever and make that same progress every time. So at a certain point, it will run its course, I'd say. But I do think bulking beyond 15% is, I wouldn't say it's required, but the correlation with naturals that make most of their progress with bulks like that is pretty strong, I'd say.
Yeah, I think also people have to consider what is really 15% because in a real 15%, you probably have a little bit of like ab definition outline and like you're still reasonably lean. There's no shortage of men who are probably 20+% who say they're 15%. So if that's you, then yeah, you don't need to go over what you think is 15% because you're probably 20+%. If we're
Right.
actually going by like true 15% and whatnot, I would say I agree. Like, even though in theory, and obviously a lot of advanced guys, they stop doing the big bulks and they say, oh, it wasn't necessary. It's just, I mean, it's completely ubiquitous that people who have made great progress naturally have bulked up to significantly high body fats, usually in the 18 to 20% body fat range. I don't, I mean, I've almost never seen it not be the case. Do I think it's completely necessary? I mean, maybe not. I think in reality, it's what happens. If for no other reason, then it just ensures that you are in a surplus for a long enough period of time, right? So maybe in theory, you could be like 10%, it could slowly go up to like 15, 16% and go back down. It just in practice, I don't see that. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we do have studies showing that like bigger bulks don't necessarily put on more muscle and all of that. But I think certainly there's an individual aspect, and for many, it can be helpful to push past it and hit new high weights.
I agree, and I think there's something to there's at least a correlation between being able to pursue a bulk like that and being somebody that has the ability to just go all out. Like if you're somebody that's always almost non-committal, like the people that kind of flip-flop between bulking and cutting and that flip-flop between high and low frequency or high and low volume or rotate lifts all the time, the people that are kind of always these fence sitters on any training or diet variable, it's kind of the lack of commitment or overall long-term consistency that's going to hold you back. And if you're somebody that has the mindset of I'm just going to dedicate a year, even up to 2 years, of just gaining a reasonable amount of weight, maybe a pound, 2 pounds a month, a pound and a half to 2 pounds a month consistently. I don't care if I go a little bit over 20% body fat. I'm still going to keep it relatively reasonable. If you're somebody that can just accept that I'm going to go all out and I have that, you almost have that kind of like bulletproof mindset when you're bulking too. You forget about fatigue. You're less susceptible to overuse or general fatigue from going high in volume. You kind of feel invincible when you're bulking. There's something about being able to repeatedly train and build that momentum of just making strength gains too, even if it's not directly correlated with muscle growth. If you're just like a little stronger because you're in a surplus or have a little bit more fat stored throughout your body, that generates some momentum in your training. The PRs feel good, and it's kind of this cycle that continues to repeat itself for the duration of that bulk. And that almost makes you more motivated to continue to push things and continue to train harder and harder over time. And if you're somebody that's trying to like recomp and your training's kind of the same and you're worried more about whether you should bulk or if you're too lean and you're worried about fatigue and all these things, it's almost like there's more of a correlation between the people that have the mindset it takes to get as big as they possibly can are going to be the people that are comfortable going for one of those big bulks just to ensure they're in a surplus for a super long period of time, even if it's not like entirely necessary to go into that much of a surplus for that long. So it's probably just at least correlated with the mentality of the people that do get big naturally.
Yep, totally agree. I like this one. Kalizzy asks, if you had lost all of your gains today, what would you do to get jacked again ASAP? Split, diet, etc.
Hmm. I would probably go. So if I lost all my gains, I'm assuming this is so do we could go about this in a couple ways. So would you rather go about it from like muscle memory as a thing and I'm just regaining muscle that I happened to lose, or if is
Hmm.
this like me starting over from day one?
That's a good question. I'd say if it's reasonable in length, you could probably go into both.
Yeah, so I would say if I just like took 6 months or a year off of training and I had all this muscle memory where I could just kind of regain everything, I would just do a super high frequency split. I'd probably just go about full body every other day. I think that makes a whole ton of sense because you can just get as much stimulus as you possibly can in terms of how many times can you stimulate growth. I do think that would rebuild muscle the quickest. Um, as far as exercise selection goes, I wouldn't even worry about it all that much. I don't think you have to be optimal when you're just regaining muscle. So I just pick stuff that I enjoy or pick stuff that's frankly a little bit easier so I can get through more muscle groups in that full body session. If I was to restart from day one as a beginner, I would actually keep the split I followed as a beginner the same. I would do either an upper lower 6 days a week or push pull 6 days a week. For myself personally, I find that uh, lifting when you're in the beginner stage is pretty enjoyable. It's sure it's a little tiring, it's a little fatiguing, but you can you don't really run into recovery issues when you're not that strong. So as a beginner, I train 6 days a week. I enjoy training, especially at that stage. When you get stronger, it beats you up a lot more. No doubt about that. It's actually more common to reduce volume or frequency when you're more advanced. But I would follow kind of the same split I had. I'd probably do one or two variations per muscle group per session, training each muscle group 3 times a week, following the same exercise selection principles that I follow right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to break it up into like what I if I just lost it all. I would also talk about breaking it up by age. So, I'm 34. So is it like if I woke up tomorrow and all of a sudden I was like I'd never worked out, or am I back to being, 14 or something? Because that would play a factor into it. I mean, talking about like a 20-year difference there.
Mhm.
So if I was 14 again, I mean, for one, I would just not obsess as much about diet leanness in terms of, like the whole missing social opportunities and everything. But I would, and even now, I would still go with a pretty high frequency plan with relatively short workouts. Like I would just pick a few key lifts, probably like 3 lifts per body part. And as I got more advanced, I would decrease the frequency, but I would probably hit that body part 3 times a week with a different exercise and just get as strong as possible in moderate rep ranges in all of those exercises. Like three that I just really think like these are really hitting home. As I get stronger, they're clearly going to translate to bigger gains. and I would just go on at least a 2 year gaining phase. Like I wouldn't even consider any sort of dieting. I would set protein just reasonably, 1 gram per pound would be more than enough. I would try to be gaining, I mean, initially I'd probably be gaining 1 pound a week at that like beginner stage, and then I would slowly taper that off as it became obvious that like more of it was being fat. And I would just do that. I mean, it might even be more than that. It might even be 3 years before, like, as long as I was not getting above 20% body fat, that's what I would do is higher frequency, key exercises, and just trying to get as strong as possible.
Yeah, spot on. Pretty much on the same page there, huh?
Yep, yep. Let's see. Waleed, minimum number of sets per week to grow a muscle group. So that'll probably be a fast one, but I would say honestly, again, where are you in your lifting journey? Initially, you go with 1 set. Even as an advanced lifter, I have something coming out today on like low volume programming and whatnot. I feel like there's a lot of guys who have demonstrated that it could be 2 to 3 sets. Like it can be quite low, but that's to grow. I'm not going to say that that's necessarily quote unquote optimal.
Yeah, so to grow, I think in certain cases 2 sets a week. I don't know if 2 sets once a week would do anything, but maybe 1 set done twice a week could get you to technically grow. If we're talking about maximizing growth, it's definitely not that. But I'd say if we're talking like just being reasonable here, I think 4 sets a week is what I'd look for. Like if you're doing just you can kind of talk yourself into being able to get away with lower volume just by like saying, okay, it's a standard routine. Let's say you're doing 3, maybe 4 sets per muscle group done twice a week. So say for your quads, you're doing 3 sets of hack squats and then a set of leg extensions on Monday. And then on Thursday, you're doing 3 sets of leg press and then a set of leg extensions on Thursday. I don't think you would see all that much drop off in overall growth if you were just to do, say, 2 sets of pendulums on Monday and 2 sets of leg press on Thursday, especially if your intensity is incredibly high. So I think 4 sets a week can get you some solid growth. I've seen clients and even myself get very solid growth on 4 sets a week. So I do think it's viable in certain cases, I would say. But once you're talking like 3 or 2 sets a week, I think that's it sounds like a small drop off, but I do think that's where you'll start to notice kind of a drop off in growth.
Cool. Bright Jake, do you think wide grip pull downs are worth it for lats specifically? I find them to be more so Terry's.
Yeah, so I do think they have their time and place for lats. It is going to be a good amount of Terry's, and assuming you're getting some type of depression and retraction, it's going to be a good amount of like mostly lower traps too. But I would say if your lats are lagging a bit and you want to get more variation and you want to have your elbows a little bit more flared in some type of your movements, then yeah, I'd say it's definitely worth including. I try to include some type of pronated flared elbow training generally in the scapular plane, um, once a week in most of my training phases.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like old school thoughts were, super wide grip to get a wide back. And then I remember even when I was getting started lifting 20 years ago, I remember seeing this video of this trainer. I have no idea what the video was, but I can picture him. And he was like, that's actually a myth. And in reality, when you have a narrower grip, that gets the lats more. And so that was like myth busting even 20 years ago. And since then, I think that's generally been agreed. A lot of people talk about, okay, it actually more not narrow, but like a shoulder width grip is great. But then, obviously there's a lot to be said for variation. And just recently, Alex Leonidas was on the channel saying, hey, you know what? Wide grip pull-ups, he felt really unlocked new gains for him, not only in terms of a new pull-up PR, but in terms of just overall like back size, and I believe you mentioned last specifically. So
Hmm.
I think there is something to be said for just implementing variation, and that if you're just doing the same thing all the time, if somebody said to me, I need one movement to grow my lats, I would not say a wide grip pull down, but I think implementing it in phases is fine.
Yeah, definitely. And especially as we start to learn more about muscle groups having different functions in different regions that are better at certain, excuse me, certain parts of the range of motion or certain functions overall, I think it just makes more sense that targeting different variations or different quote unquote angles, as some people like to say. I think there is some use to that, even if it's not quite worth obsessing over.
Sure. Cool. So we can get a few more through here. Feeling nausea during training, supersets exacerbate this in a hot environment. Any fix for that?
Uh, Not really. No, not really. Other than stay hydrated and pay attention to your meal timing, I guess would be the other thing as far as nausea goes. But um, no, that's that's probably my best advice.
So my fix would be after your first set, two Tums. After your second set, 3 tablespoons of Pepto-Bismol. After your fourth set, no, I think realistically, the only time I've ever gotten super nauseous is during like the really intense leg days. So obviously part of that is going to be hydration. Part of that is going to be not consuming too much directly prior to your workout. I mean, I've known people who've done like 1,000+ calorie shakes prior or intra workout. So I would avoid anything like that. I don't know if this individual has tried fasted training. At this point, I train almost exclusively fasted. I really prefer it. I just like having a light stomach and then knowing I could have a big meal afterwards. I think that it's if there's any negative downside to it, it's very minimal as long as you're eating right afterwards. So I would give that a shot. Other than that, you might look into some like actual anti-nausea things, but obviously you don't want to go too crazy with that.
Mm.
All
Yeah,
right.
some kind of random questions in there.
Some of them, yeah, like I mean, this will be just like a fun, quick one for you. When is the road to 19-inch arms?
Uh, no set time frame for that. I mean, I would actually have to do a I think I would want to just do another road to 18-inch arms with some asterisks. And I know it's boring. It's not nearly as exciting as just getting to the 18-inch measurement, kind of like a bigger by the day type series. But I think if I was to do road to 18-inch arms under 200 or under 195 or something like that would just be a much more pragmatic and frankly practical way to go about it rather than bulking back up to like 23% body fat
Yeah, I was
just for
gonna
the
say
sake of
maybe
measurement.
healthier
So
too.
yeah, totally. So I don't see myself getting back up to those measurements or that the body weight that I would need to have 19-inch arms. If by the time I'm like late 30s and I've been like chipping away on preachers once or twice a week for a decade and I like have happened to have 19-inch arms at around 200 pounds, like I'm happy to go for it. And who knows? Like it could happen sooner. Um, I like to keep an open mind with that kind of stuff. So I'm not necessarily saying I have to be to these crazy levels of body fat to measure in at 19 inches, but I would have some work to do to get there. I'm at 17 and a half now at the high 180s. So I would have to I would want to get 18 first at a reasonable body weight, and then I could probably think about it from there. But it's a
17
huge
and a
measurement
half at
anyways. So
the, dude, that's crazy. 17 and a half at the high 180s. That's awesome. Because, like, if I think of
I
myself, Brian, Abel, we all have very similar measurements at similar weights. So I think
think,
Abel's arms are a bit smaller, but he's got very short limbs relative to his height. So it actually, if anything, looks better. But yeah, I think when I'm 200, mine are like 17 and a quarter or something like that. So if you're like 12 pounds under that and you're sure, what are you, 5'10" or something?
5'8".
5'8". Okay. So 5'8" with 17 and a half inch arms, man. That's huge.
So the one kind of
Huge.
crazy thing, and some people that have been following my channel know this, but somebody commented on my ape index. I didn't even know what that was last year. So for those of you that don't know, your ape index is your wingspan to height ratio. So there was a natty or not post about me on Reddit. And
Mm.
one of the comments was like, this guy must have a negative ape index, basically saying that I have super short arms relative to my height. And I was actually like, you know what? Let me check that. Like, I wonder if that has to do with anything. And I ended up finding out that I have like a freak, like a genetic freak, ape index in the other direction. My wingspan it's over 6'4", and I'm 5'8". So it's 6'4" and a half, 5 feet
What?
8 inches tall. It's this crazy, crazy thing. And I think that's part of why my arms measure quite big. Like, obviously, the gains are night and day compared to what they were at before. The measurements have gone up. But I'm wondering if, like, if my wingspan was like 5'10" or something, if my arms would measure like half
Mm.
an inch smaller or something. But who knows?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's super interesting because I always say, Abel and I have talked a few times. We're the same height. I mean, we never stood next to each other, but we're both about 6'1". And my arm span is 6'4", and my where my hip is like 2.5 to 3 inches higher than his, which is kind of
Yeah.
wild for people who are the same height. Um, but to hear at 5'8", you're like 6'4" plus wingspan. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, it's I kind of noticed that I have like not only do I have long limbs, but I have a short torso. So like my torso is quite stocky. Um, One of the things that I first kind of picked up on was when I was in high school, I noticed that so I played hockey out and I was a goalie. The leg pads I would wear were the same size as the guys that were like 6'3". So I'm like, why do these fit me? Like this is kind of weird. Like I'm not
Hmm.
even tall. Um, and then I noticed that when I got into lifting, I was like, this is taking me an oddly long time to get big arms because they look obnoxious. Like my arms are just crazy long. Like my hands are like at my knees, I feel like when I
Yeah.
stand up. And then I kind of noticed like that same like hip height thing. My hips were taller than like people that were taller than me. I'm like, something's odd with my proportions. Then that ape index measurement, I was like, okay, that kind of confirms like now this kind of makes more sense why like I always had such a hard time with barbell squats and why deadlifts just came so easy to me. And I could
Hmm.
deadlift like over 600 in like 2 or 3 years of lifting. So I'm like, this, it's
Wow.
all starting to kind of add up
What
now.
was your max deadlift?
Very strange build. The most I ever lifted was 605. It was probably like an RPE 9.5, as powerlifters would say, where it's like it wasn't a true max, but I couldn't have done another rep, I don't think. So
But you did
who knows
that in
if
two
I
to
would
three
have
years
been
of
another, but
lifting?
yeah,
And then you just stopped deadlifting or what?
pretty much, yeah. I was
Okay.
like, this is just killing me. It was so much weight. It was so heavy. I got sick of loading up the plates. So I do stiff leg deadlifts now, and I'm actually pretty weak on these. I haven't deadlifted in forever for the most part. So the strength is not even close to comparable. Like I'm doing like 405 on these for my
Interesting.
work sets, but it's pretty wild because my big deadlift was sumo, so I wouldn't even count
Mm,
that as like all that impressive. It's a whole debate on whether it's better or
sure.
not, but it's yeah,
It's
deadlifts. I'm
impressive to
completely
me.
built to deadlift.
How to program a good bodybuilding program if you're a busy individual, say you have 3 days. And we'll do one more after this.
Did you say a good bodybuilding or a good body weight program?
Bodybuilding.
Bodybuilding program. Yeah. So if you have and it was 3 days to train per week, you
Yeah.
said?
Yep.
Yeah, I would say full body is going to be your best bet. And I wouldn't be like outright minimalist, but I would try and kill two birds with one stone where possible. So if you're able to say do direct, say direct like delt work twice per week with like an overhead press or like a lateral raise or something, and then on day three do like a 45-degree incline press, and you can count that as your pec and your delt work for that session. Same goes for like maybe the triceps, where you could do dips and count that for your pecs and triceps on one day, and then have dedicated pec and tricep work on the other two. So it's almost like if you go through a normal full body routine where you have six major movement patterns, try and combine some of them into five lifts per session so you can reduce the overall workload just a little bit. I find that keeps it pretty manageable. If time and energy isn't an issue for you on the days you are training, then of course you have the freedom to do a little bit more variation if you want to do six, seven, maybe eight lifts in some cases.
Yeah, I've always found it odd. I'm even like argue with people about this where, I remember somebody saying like, oh, like every serious lifter lifts 5 or more days a week. And I'm like, that's a lot of them do, but not all of them. I mean, like Yates famously at times lifted much less than that and, had lower volume. All of the DC training advocates, not all, but a lot of the majority of them are doing 3 days a week. Ken Skip Hill is doing 3 days a week. I mean, there's just a Max OT. Like, there's so many examples of people who've made tremendous gains on 3 days a week. And even if you just look at for frequent, like if you look at frequency specifically, very few studies show a benefit to more than 3 times per week frequency. If you look at volume, the volume that is generally recommended could totally fit in 3 days a week. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with 4 or 5 or 6 days a week, but you can absolutely do a ton in 3 days a week. And then the other thing is, are you limited in the time per day? I mean, obviously there's some limit, but if you're telling me it's got to be three 40-minute workouts, okay, now we're starting to get a little bit limited. But if you're saying, hey, I have a home gym like I do, and it's like, okay, I'll do three 90-minute workouts, well, then you can get a ton in that time. And then again, if you're doing full body or you're doing upper lower, you should be doing antagonistic supersets if you have any sort of limitation on your time. And then you can also do rest pause training. You can do myo reps, which is basically a form of rest pause. You can do drop sets. Like there's, and I don't implement all of those, but if I look at my actual training, I mean, there's been times where I've gone up decently high in volume, and it's basically just more dense workouts, so to speak. So a throwback to anybody who remembers escalating density training back on T Nation from like 20 years ago. But anyway,
Long
you
time.
can you can do a lot with that. So I would say full body or upper lower, and again, you can just alternate like an AB kind of thing, and antagonistic supersets. And if you want to as well, you could do rest pause, drop sets, myo reps, etc. And I think you could absolutely get all the volume you need. And then, of course, you have to have the intensity there. So that's not a specific like exercise breakdown or sets or anything, but more conceptually, if you have 3 days a week, you can do almost everything you need.
Yeah, and the rest is just if it works better in your schedule to cut down the session time, like if you work 5 days a week and you have busy weekends or something like that, it's like it might make more sense to do 50 to 60 minute sessions 5 times a week. But
Yeah,
to say that it's going to get you better gains than a 3 times a week full body split when you have a little bit more time during those sessions, it when you view your training as almost like a weekly checklist or a weekly count of volume and in the overall workload, then you kind of realize that the split doesn't do all that much outside of dictate your frequency and then just your overall schedule.
sure. All right. Last one. How do you program brachialis training in your arm program?
So I don't always train the brachialis directly. So if we're talking like a pronated, semi-pronated, or a neutral grip variation of a curl, I don't do a whole ton of it directly. I found that just going crazy hard on preacher curls and growing my biceps as much as I could just led to so much indirect brachialis growth that while it's not as developed as my biceps, I would say, it still got me sufficient growth to where if I needed to continue to grow my brachialis, I would just add in more work from there. But what I do like to do is let's say your biceps are your high priority. You're going to train in a more conventional way with supinated curl variations twice a week, or say 3 times a week if you're on full body. What I like to do is for the brachialis, if you want to be convenient and efficient with the way you train and also get an excellent stimulus, I would do 1 to 2 sets of hammer curls or variation of choice, whether it's a cable or strict wall supported dumbbell hammer curl, reverse curl, whatever variation you prefer. 1 to 2 sets after your bicep training should do the trick. If you want to do 1 set, you should be able to sneak that in just fine. And if you want to do 2 sets, you could probably shed away one of your bicep supinated sets, and that should work totally fine. It should fit right within your program. From here, one thing I like to kind of think about is the brachialis, you don't necessarily have to treat as its own muscle group. You can almost treat it as like an extension of your bicep. So anytime you do bicep work, you're training your brachialis. So volume requirements don't need to be quite as high as it would for another muscle group. If you're already doing supinated curls, you probably don't have to do 3 sets of hammer curls twice a week. I do think at that point the brachialis is getting pretty cooked. So 1 or 2 sets twice a week will definitely work. Even once a week, where your other supinated variation can take care of still getting some stimulus, I think that could work quite well too. So for that stuff, I'm usually not too nitpicky with it. I usually don't I try not to think about it all that much. It's definitely a secondary focus for myself. But if it is a high priority, like I said, 1 or 2 sets of hammer curls to your favorite variation, neutral, pronated, semi-pronated grip, post bicep work, and you should be good.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with all that. I know this is not what, makes for the most clickable video or headlines or anything like that, but I'm just not somebody who has experienced this huge change in muscle growth with different emphasis. Now, again, I say that as somebody who has always tried to follow a generally well-structured program. So obviously, like if I was only ever squatting and that was the only thing I ever did for legs, yeah, I would expect that like, okay, maybe try some like, lying back leg extensions and actually doing some leg curls and direct calf training, all these things like would make a difference to your legs if you're talking about extreme like that. But if you are already doing a lot of strapless rowing and pull-ups and barbell curls and like the occasional like reverse curl, like I just have not experienced like, oh, and then once I started implementing this and this, I saw all of a sudden this rapid, like my brachialis was pumped up or my brachioradialis, which is probably my favorite muscle from a visual standpoint. And I used to do a lot of direct forearm training, like a lot of it. I used to do, you had like the roller, and I used to do a lot of reverse curls and behind the back reverse curl or like wrist curls, tons of wrist curls. And I'll just tell you, man, like all that stuff, I never saw a difference. And you would think logically, like, why wouldn't you? And I think I just, through all my bicep and back training, I was getting the stimulus and adding all that stuff did. And like I have relatively unimpressive forms. Like I can get a good picture of like my biceps and everything looking pretty good. Forms, again, just lanky, kind of thin, whatever. I wish that wasn't the case, but I just haven't seen that. So I could tell you these are the exercises that emphasize it and I could do that for any muscle group, but I personally haven't seen a significant emphasis on them change the growth personally.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing within my own training, but I would also say I haven't taken my forearm training as seriously as I could. Like if I'm looking at the intensity and the focus and consistency I had on the Road to 18-inch arm series, where I was like basically a maniac for preacher curls and Smith JM press. If I took that same approach to forearm training, I I would think I would make really good gains, but it's just hard to tell what is still there to be made after bicep work. So I think the one kind of caveat here, the almost little elephant in the room, I would say is, what if you just do, what if you just reverse them and say, all right, forearms, brachialis, brachioradialis are my primary focus. And then I'll do one or two sets of supinated traditional bicep work after that. Will you then get better gains on the forearm brachialis area? So I would have to experiment with it more personally, but yeah, as of now, I would say my forearms are good, but probably still underdeveloped relative to my biceps. So I want to think that there's more potential to tap into there, but ultimately, I think I'm satisfied enough with the size to where I don't care to have this massive experiment with forearms. But who knows? Maybe one day that switch will flip in my head.
Yeah, and again, as I don't mean it in any way as like a defeatist mindset. I just think people like there was a post when I don't know if he was like Menno Henselmans was saying how he felt like he was naturally tapped out, and like one of the posts was like, "Oh, really? Like, have you been training your forearms optimally? Have you been training
Yeah,
this?" And it's like, come on, bro. Like, even if that was the case, what are we talking about? A couple ounces? Like, for all intents
yeah.
and purposes, he's maxed out. Like that, just you're being ridiculous. You think you need 15 years of optimized forearm training? So, and even honestly, with Alex Leonidas, when he was on my podcast, he was saying how like his calves are at a beginner level because he hasn't really done too much direct calf training, and he feels like he's still got 2 inches. And I told him I don't remember if it was like $1,000, 500, whatever it was. I told him like I will pay you whatever that amount of money was if at the same body weight you can add 2 inches to your calves. It's just not happening because you've already like you've taken your squat to whatever 500 pounds. You've taken your straight legged deadlifts. Like these things incorporate the calves, you're growing your general body. Like I think people like show me somebody who started with 11-inch calves and then got to like a 600-pound squat and a 650-pound deadlift and did all these things and gained 50 pounds of body weight and their calves didn't grow. Like the body grows as a whole. So
Mhm.
now again, I say that as somebody who after never training neck directly, after 13 years of training, started neck training, and gained a full inch at the same body weight. So I'm not saying like there's no potential for anything. I think that's a very direct, clear example. But I do sometimes think people really overemphasize like after you've already got a sound program, what some of these little tweaks are going to do.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think there's something about it that does grow your whole body. Like if you were to look at my neck, for example, like people say I have a big neck.
Mhm.
I started doing neck curls literally last week for the first time. And I'm like, I can't remember what my neck measures, but it's decent. It's over 17 inches, and
Mhm.
I've never trained it before. So it's like it's some of that maybe upper traps that actually do
Yeah,
attach up on
yeah.
your neck. I'm sure, but even like my neck flexors like down here, like they're not. I guarantee you, if you found a picture from before I started lifting, they look different now, even though I've never done direct neck work. So
Yeah.
things like even the calves to an extent, like I do think my calves are probably bigger than when I started lifting. I haven't gone as hard on squats as somebody like Alex Leonidas has, so I'd assume he has at least some more indirect growth than I would. But yeah, especially for an area like the forearms, where it's like an integral part to
Yeah.
actually your back movements and everything, even if the proximity to failure isn't RPE 10, it's still going to get some growth. So it's kind of like once you're advanced or kind of mostly tapped out in certain areas, the areas you haven't trained are probably still intermediate, right?
Yeah, and yeah, to your point, forearms way more involved with back and biceps and like your neck would be on, whatever else you're doing. So cool.
Right.
I think was that the last one, or did we say one more? I think we can wrap that up there because I do have to actually jump off here. So
Cool.
cool. All right, man. I thought that was good. Again, people listening, let us know what you think about the format. We didn't get through all the questions, but we got through a decent amount. Always good chatting with Landon. And where can we find you, man?
Yeah, so YouTube is just basement bodybuilding. I do some Q&As and stuff on my own channel. If you want to follow my Instagram, I do my polls on there, basement.bodybuilding, and you'll get a post once a month or something at most.
Cool, man.